It's 50 BC, and here we are in a Celtic Briton village where life goes on in much the same way as it always has. 4 children help their parents on the farm. They are Alice, who is 12, Cadman, who is 10, her brother, Briane, age 6, and Lou, who is 4. And each of their names has a special meaning. Alice, noble. Cadman, wise warrior. Briane, honourable. And Lou, light. And although it's still very early in the morning, they've already made a start checking the animals and making sure that they've been well fed and watered and that they're comfortable. And they've got geese and pigs and cows and sheep. At night, the sheep sleep in the family home where it's warm. But the geese and the other animals, they've got their own shelter. The houses in the village are round in shape and made from wattle and daub. And wattle is wood that's been woven together, hazelwood or willow, and then it's coated very thickly with a mixture of mud and straw. That means that it's nice and warm because on the roof they've got tightly packed straw. And in the middle of their house they've got a fire that gives them warmth, it gives them somewhere to cook, and of course when it gets very dark it gives them light. And the smoke rises up and it seeps out through the thatch. Their father is a warrior, and he's got a sword and he's got a spear made from iron. And their family, going back generations, they were the ones who discovered that iron could be used to make things like weapons, swords and daggers and spears, as well as making things to dig furrows in the ground and to use shovels and other useful things and buckles for belts. That was how it became known as the Iron Age. But back to their father, the warrior. He and his friends practice and practice and practice to build up their strength and their muscles to make sure that they're ready if they are needed for battle. Cadman very much wants to be a warrior when he grows up, and sometimes in the evenings he will play fight with his dad. Practice, practice, practice to be the best warrior he can be too. This particular afternoon, late afternoon, as the villagers were looking out, they saw in the far distance the figure of a stranger, someone they hadn't seen before, coming towards them. And as he got closer, they realised he was someone very important and very special. The clothing in the village, the clothing that the families wore, were tunics and accessories like coats and capes, jewellery and belts. But this man, he was dressed differently, because on his head he had the most amazing headdress, very ornate, highly decorated, with a helmet with a horsehair plume. And he carried around his waist a sword in a highly decorated scabbard, and a spear and other weapons, and a shield with a brass circular boss on it. And he joined them, and the villagers welcomed him. And he sat down, and they asked him, invited him to have food with them and things to drink. And once they had settled, he told them something about his life and why he was there. I have come from Gaul in France. I've travelled across the waters, and I am a warrior. And we have been invaded by the Roman army, and I have spent time finding out as much as I could about them, the way they plan their battles, the way they fight. And I have come here to tell you, to prepare you in case and when the Romans come here. I've left my home and my family, and I need to move on north. The families there, the villagers, thanked him, and he stayed the night with them before leaving in the morning. Once he'd gone, they all said how amazing he had been to be with them. Cadman said, "He is a kind of hero. I'd like to be a hero one day when I grow up." Village life went back to how it was until many, many months later, news reached the village that the Gaul Warrior had died. Everyone in the village was really sad because they, although they'd only met him that once, realised how brave he had been to leave his family and his home and to travel all the way over the waters to help them. Some of the men decided that they would go to the funeral, and so they left as soon as they could. When they returned, all the villagers got back together again and waited to hear what had happened. And one of the men came forward. It was the father of the 4 children, and he said, "This is what happened at the funeral. The grave had been dug, and the warrior was brought in on a chariot, and he was carefully lifted and lowered into the grave. And then a blacksmith came and bent the warrior's sword, which showed and signified the ending of his life, and that was placed inside the grave. And then his helmet and his headdress were put in the grave too, along with his daggers and weapons, part of his shield. And then people brought pots of food and lowered into the grave too, and others put pots in which they smashed to celebrate the warrior's life. And then from the chariot they brought the wooden box and placed it over the warrior, and finally it was filled in with earth and covered over. And all of us there, and there were many, many people, stood silently and remembered the warrior, how brave he had been, what a hero he had been. We remembered him." Cadman whispered, "He was so brave. We're remembering him. And I wonder if, in years and years and years to come, if people would hear about him then and remember him." Little did Cadman know that 2,000 years later, people would remember him, because we remember him, and we know him as the Mystery Warrior.